with that, let's enter our group chat now. Hayes Brown, writer and editor for MS Now Daily, former Democratic New York Congressman Max Rose, who's now a senior advisor to Vote Vets, David Rohde, Pulitzer Prize winner, love to say that, David, and MS Now senior national security reporter, making him blush, and Michael Schnell, MS Now congressional reporter. Michael, let's start with your reporting. You've been talking to lawmakers and how they're feeling when it comes to the president's SAVE Act push. Even Republicans are squeamish here.
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for months, right? And it hasn't just been light pressure. It's been intense pressure. President Trump has gone off on some of these Republican skeptics online, in person. He canceled that housing bill signing ceremony that a lot of folks were excited about. This has been a full court press by the president, and it just has not been working. There was a vote in the Senate in April. It was unsuccessful. There was a vote in the Senate in June. It was unsuccessful. At this point, Republicans want the president to shift his course. I heard from one Republican who said that the president is trying to push a square peg through a circle hole, and it's just not working. They want him to shift the narrative. First off, they want him to move the messaging off of Republicans are to blame and say Democrats are to blame for this inaction. They're upset about this Republican on Republican violence so close to a midterm election. They also want the president, if he wants to salvage any opportunity to do voting legislation before November, they want him to try to scale down that legislation, maybe try to do just voter ID and not proof of citizenship. Voter ID does have high polling among the public. And thirdly, maybe think about trying to negotiate with Democrats. Now, Republicans may have said that in one breath, but in the next, they said, I don't think this is likely. The president is very much so stuck in his ways and doesn't want to change. Just recently, he said he doesn't want to negotiate on the Save America Act. But Republicans are getting sick of this current situation, and they're afraid it could come bite them in November.
God forbid we see some bipartisan cooperation. Hayes, the pressure to pass the SAVE Act has been ramping up since the Supreme Court ruled that mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day could stand. You know, what do you make of the Republican on Republican infighting on this?
I think that it shows that Trump has locked into a certain version of reality at this point and he's unwilling to listen. He's unwilling to hear that there are just not the votes in the Senate. And I think Mike Johnson has been sort of enabling in this because Johnson derives so much of his power from Trump, he can't say no to Trump. So when Johnson says, we're going to try and pass it through reconciliation, one, what budget reconciliation bill? How are we going to get that through in time before the midterms? And two, even if they do manage to attach something, if it's not as narrow as potentially offering up in like financial incentives for states to have voter ID requirements, that's not going to pass in parliamentary. It's going to be stripped out of any reconciliation bill, leaving them right back where they started.
So, David, on the NATSAC front of things, or I guess more in your wheelhouse here, you know, the Save America Act is targeted at allegedly making our elections safer. But you've argued many times that our elections are safe, that, you know, through court judgments, through much research, there hasn't been any mass wide-scale attempt at fraud in our election process.
Yeah, there's never been any evidence of like all these conspiracies Trump has talked about, like a foreign, nation somehow changing vote totals. And then on terms of this just basic idea of what you mentioned, proof of citizenship, that's the biggest problematic part of this bill. So they actually had a proof of citizenship requirement in Kansas several years ago. Roughly 30,000 eligible voters were blocked from voting. And the problem is that only 50% of Americans have passports. And then I was surprised by this number, and I won't ask you to comment. Still, roughly 2/3 of American women take their husband's names. So this is this very basic thing of they have to produce.
I didn't, by the way.
Well, no comment.
Because it's Frankenstein.
Nor did my wife. But so you can vote because it's the same name on the birth certificate. There are tens of millions of women in this country who won't be able to vote because they won't have gone in and gotten an updated birth certificate and don't have a passport. And that hurts Republicans as well. So it is this very stubborn thing he's insisting in terms of proof of citizenship that's not needed. There's very little evidence of voter fraud anyway. And he's insisting on the most draconian, unworkable version that just is going to turn out by both sides.
So, Max, as a former congressman, we have Wall Street Journal calling this a zombie Congress already, a fait accompli, a foregone conclusion, whatever you want to call it, that they're just not going to do anything at this point. We have August recess coming up. Is there a chance that there is some bipartisan cooperation here, or, has the train left the station?
I mean, they did do something. They did TikTok videos last week. So let's give them...
an accomplishment.
Let's give them credit for that. Some of them were streamed on multiple different platforms at the same time, a true accomplishment. Look, in the end, we are in full campaign season. And so I think the chances of something occurring are less likely. But this was not this kind of sclerotic inactivity that we've seen from Mike Johnson's Congress for the past 18 months. That was not the norm previous to that. This isn't like a 21st century phenomenon. Under the Biden administration, we saw, amidst pretty divisive politics, we saw Congress accomplish some extraordinary things. Remember the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Recovery Act. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So Congress does have that capability, but Donald Trump does not want them to get anything done.
He's the
and
Trump
Mike
card.
Johnson is a fully owned subsidiary of Donald Trump. This is not an independent Congress. This is an appendage of the Trump political operation.
So, Michael, as Max notes, we've seen the dysfunction on full display. And one of the things that the president is trying to tout when we have this affordability conversation is what we saw this morning, which is the Trump accounts. We saw the NASDAQ, the NYSE at the White House for the opening bell. Do Republicans feel like it's enough when they have to address the affordability issue? Is that image? Are these accounts going to be enough to quell the frustration over the economy and how Americans are feeling out there?
I don't think it's those accounts. What I do think that they felt secure in was this bipartisan housing bill that had been worked on for months. There had been several iterations, both Democrats and Republicans. Max, it was good old bipartisan deal making up on Capitol Hill. And they had written this piece of legislation. Both parties so thrilled to sign it into law. Both parties, especially Republicans, so excited to take it back to their home districts and home states to talk about on recess. And then President Trump said, I'm actually not going to sign this bill. By the way, he still hasn't even signed the bill.
Can you explain that to us? Why wouldn't he want to? I've been doing all the research and the reading on this, and it's still confusing.
I think that, how folks want to interpret it and what the reasoning behind it, that's up to people's own interpretations and analysis. On the money of it, it came back to the Save America Act. President Trump said, I am not going to sign this bill, bipartisan bill, something that would make housing more affordable for millions of Americans, something Republicans were so excited about. He said he wasn't going to sign it into law until Congress had passed the Save America Act, which, again, time and time again has proven it doesn't have support. And it's not even just because of Democrats. It's because of Republicans as well. The two times that the Senate has voted on this, there have been 4 Republicans who have voted against it. This is just not happening. Republicans have said it's a math problem, but President Trump said he was going to hold this housing bill hostage until there was movement on the Save America Act. Now, granted, Speaker Johnson has sent it over. The clock is ticking for whether he's just going to let it become law without signing it, or if he will actually put his pen to paper. Speaker, I spoke to him last week. He insists that the president is going to sign this into law, but we haven't seen it yet. And again, it all comes back to the fact that Republicans were happy about that, especially with affordability being the dominating topic, but it was cut from under their feet because of the Save America Act.
Yeah, they could have gone home over this 4th of July and had something to tout. So Hayes, we have reporting from the Wall Street Journal that lawmakers are not even going to show up at this point. You have an attrition, so to speak, in Congress. What does that foreshadow for what's to come here?
I think it foreshadows. This is worst case scenario. I would not be surprised if we're talking in a couple of months about a shutdown pre the midterms. Because right now there's
September?
That's September, October. Because October 1st is when the new fiscal year starts. They've been struggling to pass even the annual spending bills that Republicans in the House are all agreed on. That's one of the things that got thrown into chaos before they left for recess. Mike Johnson wanted to pass at least 1 or 2 of them, of these appropriations bills, but the blockade on the House floor over the Save America Act kept that from happening. So I think that if they don't get the proper attendance, if they don't get people who are actually willing to do things, I think in a couple of months we'll be wondering, are they going to be able to even pass a continuing resolution before we get to the midterms?
So as a former member of Congress, how should Democrats be leveraging the chaos that's going on the Republican side of the aisle? How are they reading this right now?
Step back and let them continue to screw this thing up. It is as clear as day that they are incapable of governing. When you look at this SAVE Act, for instance, right? Donald Trump is not trying to legislate with this. Let's get this out of our heads. This is not what's going on. He is trying to scare the hell out of people to justify federal interference in our upcoming elections. Now, what's interesting here as we consider the Democratic response to that is it's not just the House and the Senate that should be responses from our governors as well. You think about where are our contested House races? They're actually concentrated in states with Democratic governors. Virginia, Michigan, New York, New Jersey. California. That's where the game is right now. So we can start to see in the coming months potentially Senate, House leadership standing with our governors to talk about how we're going to use all the tools at our disposal to stand up to Donald Trump.
So you led me perfectly into this, Max. Thank you so much. I'll pay you later. Democratic Michigan Senate candidate Mallory McMorrow just suspended her campaign, and she was sort of seen as the bridge between a more progressive candidate and a more moderate candidate. That's at least how some people view it. What do you make of her suspending her campaign? How does this affect Michigan, which MS Now has rated as a toss-up?
Yeah, so first of all, kudos to her, right? I mean, it is one of the hardest things to do, just to step up and say, now's not the time. The stars aren't aligning. And I certainly believe when it comes to her specifically, it's a really bright political future ahead for her on the national stage as well as in Michigan. And look, at this point now, it is about as simple as can be. People have two choices, and those choices represent different factions of the Democratic Party. I don't think that she's necessarily going to step up and continue to be involved in this race, but I do think now we have a very clear juxtaposition. What the voters did not want, which they have wanted in the past, was kind of a meld of the two a little bit. People want to make a choice, and I actually think that's a good thing right now.